There's something about a voice that suddenly stops that is more unsettling than one that never spoke at all. We are used to endings. Criminals get caught, killers make mistakes, cases close. But the Zodiac killer did something far stranger than any of those things. He did none of them. He simply stopped, and no one knows why. Between December of 1968 and October of 1969, a man who called himself the Zodiac murdered at least 5 people across Northern California. His first victims were 2 high school students, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, shot to death while parked on a quiet road outside Vallejo on a December night in 1968. It was their first real date. 7 months later, he attacked another young couple in their car at a parking lot in Vallejo. 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin was killed. Her boyfriend, 19-year-old Mike Maggio, survived. Then, in September of 1969, the Zodiac drove to Lake Berrizea in Napa County and stabbed a man and a woman in broad daylight while wearing a medieval-looking hood with a crosshair stitch across the chest. His final confirmed victim was a cab driver named Paul Stein, shot in the head in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco in October of that year. The Zodiac then tore a piece of Stein's blood-soaked shirt from the body and kept it, not as a trophy but as proof. But the killings were only half the story. The Zodiac wanted to talk, and starting in the summer of 1969, he began mailing letters to 3 Bay Area newspapers. The letters were handwritten, arrogant, and deeply strange. They contained details that only the killer and the police would know. They included cryptograms, coded messages made up of dozens of symbols that the Zodiac claimed would reveal his identity. And they all carried the same demand. "Print this on your front page, or I will kill again." The newspapers complied. They had no choice. One of the first ciphers, a 408-character code, was cracked within a week by a schoolteacher couple from Salinas, California. The message was chilling. The Zodiac wrote that the killing gave him the most thrilling experience of his life, that it was more fun than hunting wild game, that when he died, his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. But he never gave his name, not in the cipher, not in the letters, not ever. And then the letters kept coming. Over the next several years, the Zodiac sent more than 20 communications to newspapers, to police, and even to a celebrity attorney named Melvin Belli. Some contained threats. Some contained jokes. One included a piece of Paul Stein's shirt. Another contained a 340-character cipher so complex that it would take 51 years to decode. He sent greeting cards. He commented on movies. He wrote to a reporter about a film called Badlands, complaining about the glorification of violence, a staggering irony from a man responsible for at least 5 murders. He mocked the San Francisco Police Department, taunting them with a running score, him versus them, as though murder were a sport. In one letter, he threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the children as they ran. Whether he meant it or not, the threat paralyzed the city. Parents kept their children home. School bus routes were changed. Armed officers rode on buses for weeks, and through it all, law enforcement could not catch him, not even close. So the Zodiac seemed unstoppable. He seemed like someone who could never and would never ever shut up. And then he did. In January 1974, the San Francisco Chronicle received what is now believed to be the Zodiac's final confirmed letter. In it, he praised the film The Exorcist. calling it the best satirical comedy he had ever seen. He quoted a line from a Gilbert and Sullivan opera, and he signed off with his familiar crosshair symbol and an updated body count. 37 victims, 0 for the police. And then, nothing. No more letters. No more ciphers. No more phone calls or threats or taunting postcards. The man who had demanded the front page of every newspaper in Northern California went completely and permanently silent. Think about that. This was not a man who killed in secret. This was a man who killed for attention. Every letter he wrote was a performance. Every cipher was a dare. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to be feared. He wanted the world to know that he was smarter than the people trying to catch him. And then he walked away from all of it. That is the real mystery of the Zodiac. Not who he was, not how many people he killed, but why, after years of reveling in the spotlight, he chose to disappear. There are theories, of course. Some investigators believe the Zodiac was arrested for an unrelated crime. The timing supports this. The most investigated suspect in the case was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted child molester who lived in Vallejo, California. In 1974, the same year the letters stopped, Allen was arrested on charges of child molestation. He was sentenced to a psychiatric facility and placed on probation. A possible Zodiac letter surfaced in 1978 after Allen's release. Allen had told friends he wanted to call himself the Zodiac. He owned a wristwatch with a crosshair logo nearly identical to the Zodiac's signature symbol, and one surviving victim even identified Allen from a photo lineup years later. But the evidence never came together. His handwriting did not match, his fingerprints did not match, his palm prints did not match. Eyewitnesses to the Paul Stine murder said Allen was not the man they saw that night. And in 2002, a partial DNA profile recovered from saliva on the stamps of Zodiac letters did not match Arthur Lee Allen either. He died of a heart attack in 1992 at the age of 58, still the only person police ever publicly named as a suspect, and still unproven. 2 days after his death, police served another search warrant on his home. They found pipe bombs and illegal weapons, but nothing that could definitively connect him to the Zodiac. Some believe the Zodiac simply died. Heart attack, a car accident, an ordinary ending to an extraordinary evil. It would explain the sudden silence, not a choice, but a circumstance. There is an uncomfortable simplicity to this theory. A man who terrorized an entire region for years could have been buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in California before anyone even thought to look for him. His obituary might have described him as a quiet neighbor, a decent co-worker, someone unremarkable. And all the while, the world kept looking for a monster. Others believe he was institutionalized, perhaps committed to a psychiatric facility under a different name, perhaps too far gone to write letters, perhaps locked away for something that had nothing to do with murder at all. And then there is a darker possibility, one that investigators do not like to talk about. Maybe he did not stop. Maybe he just stopped writing. The confirmed Zodiac killings all took place within a 10-month window between December of 1968 and October of 1969. But the letters continued for 5 more years. Some researchers, like true crime author Robert Graysmith, have argued that the Zodiac may have remained active through the 1980s and killed dozens more people. Police in Sonoma County investigated a series of unsolved murders of female hitchhikers in the early 1970s that bore similarities to the Zodiac's methods. At least 7 women were killed between 1972 and 1973, and the cases were never solved. If the Zodiac was still killing after the letters stopped, he simply removed the part of himself that craved recognition. He became invisible, which, in some ways, is the most terrifying scenario of all. A killer who learns to stop bragging. But the silence also did something else. Something the Zodiac may not have anticipated, and it kept the case alive. Because he was never caught, because there was no arrest, no trial, no confession, the Zodiac became a permanent fixture in the American imagination. The cross-haired symbol became iconic. The unsolved ciphers became obsessions. Investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths have spent decades proposing suspects. Over 2,500 names have been investigated by the San Francisco Police Department alone. And then, in 2020, something remarkable happened. 3 amateur code breakers, a software developer from Virginia named David Oranchak, a mathematician from Australia named Sam Blake, and a Belgian computer programmer named Jarl van Eyck, finally cracked the 340-character cipher that had gone unsolved for 51 years. They used custom decryption software to sift through 650,000 variations of the message, and what they found was disappointing. The cipher contained no name, no address, no clue to the killer's identity. It was more of what the Zodiac had always given: paranoid ramblings about the afterlife, slaves in paradise, and a defiant declaration that he was not afraid of the gas chamber because it would send him to paradise sooner. Even in his most complex cipher, the Zodiac gave us nothing. 51 years of effort, 650,000 computational variations, and the answer was just more noise, more delusion, more of a man screaming into the void about paradise and slaves and death. The people who cracked it described the message as essentially attention-seeking garbage, and yet even that emptiness tells us something. It tells us that the Zodiac was never interested in being understood. He was interested in being feared. The ciphers were never puzzles meant to be solved. They were performances meant to frustrate. And that brings us back to the silence. Because maybe the silence was never a mystery at all. Maybe it was the final message. Maybe the Zodiac, a man consumed with control, looked at the world chasing his ghost, looked at the police with no leads, looked at the newspapers still printing his name years after his last confirmed kill, and realized something. He had already won. The letters were never about communication. They were about power. And the most powerful thing a person who craves attention can do, once they have all of it, is refuse to speak. The San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive in 2004, then reactivated it in 2007. The FBI's investigation continued for years after that. In 2021, a group of investigators called the Case Breakers announced they had identified the Zodiac as a deceased Air Force veteran named Gary Francis Post. They pointed to scars on his forehead matching a composite sketch and claimed hidden clues in the letters spelled out his name. But police rejected the claim. The DNA did not match, and the case remains open. As of today, the Zodiac killer has never been identified. 2 of his 4 ciphers remain unsolved, and the silence that began in 1974 has now lasted more than 50 years. There is a moment in every unsolved case where the trail goes cold, where the leads dry up and the detectives retire and the files get moved to a box in the back of a room. But the Zodiac case is different. The trail did not go cold. The Zodiac killed it himself. He chose to vanish. He chose the silence. And it is that silence, not the murders, not the letters, not the ciphers, that has haunted us the longest. Serial killers who crave attention rarely stop. The BTK killer in Wichita, Kansas went silent for decades and then came back, started writing letters again, and that is how he got caught. His ego could not let the world forget him. But the Zodiac never made that mistake. Whether by death, by imprisonment, or by discipline, he held his silence. And that silence became the loudest thing about him. Because somewhere, at some point, a man put down his pen and he never picked it up again. And we still do not know his name. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the crime coroner. Much love and bliss.